get started.
We'll be with you in just a minute.
We're live. For those of you that are joining us, I'm glad to see everyone out. And you just saw Jack and Travis causing trouble right here in the middle aisle.
The teacher took care of it.
Yeah, the teacher took care of it. We are in Isaiah chapter 8 this evening. I appreciate you being here. If you have any comments, tonight's the night that I want you to jump in and help me out. I've already asked Joe to take over for me, and he's not up here yet, so I don't know what's up with that, but he's been busy. Isaiah, he's challenging for me. As I read through all this, and it's really hard for me to keep track of who's speaking to who and when's he being spoken to, or is it God speaking? Is he speaking to the people? Is he speaking to the king? Is it past tense, present tense, future tense? And so we're all over the place. Isaiah, he's as we got through finishing chapter 7, what's I don't know if the political climate, what's the climate in Judah at this point in time? What's coming down?
Woe is me.
Woe is me. Well, why would woe is me?
Well, there's all kinds of warfare going on. Assyria is coming, and there's, the northern kingdom's making alliances.
Northern kingdom's making alliances. War's coming. Their king, Ahaz, has gone and even made alliance and took things out of God's temple, gold, to pay them off. To try. Man is taking things into their own hand. And as we start in chapter 8, here, this it's continuing on. It's coming. Moreover, the Lord said to me, take a large scroll and write on it with man's pen concerning...
I don't hear you say that.
Gene's not going to let me just skip over this. Are you going to pronounce it for me?
No, but I can give you the meaning.
Well, I know the meaning, so I don't... Howard's offering to help. That's not the right kind of help. Mayor Shala Hasbaz, or Hashbaz, and I will take for myself faithful witness to record, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jerebekiah. Then I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Maher Shalal Hashbaz. For before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be taken away before the king of Assyria. Okay. Isaiah is going in to have another child. It kind of throws us off. We struggle sometimes with prophetesses, a female prophet. We don't necessarily have any idea if she ever did prophesy on her own. She may be just being called a prophetess, because she's married to Isaiah. We don't know. But we do know that this is his, at least in the account, it's going to be his second son. Howard, does his name mean?
Oh, it flipped off. I can give it to you. Meaning speed, spoil, hasten, plunder.
Speed, spoil, hasten, plunder.
Or the spoil speed, or the prey hasten.
It's hard to understand what these names mean. It's kind of like last week when we saw that, and I made the comment that I'm so grateful that I live today. All I've got to worry about is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus as the Son of God. And that's my starting point. Some of these things, but what's Isaiah doing? He's told the people. He went to the king in last chapter. He's pleaded with the king, go to God. Listen to God. The king is turning his back, so now who is Isaiah's audience going to become? The people. King's not listening. The king's already made up his mind what he's going to do no matter what God does. So now in public he's writing this out. He's got the name of his son up there. And this concept of the spoil speedeth, the prey hasteth. It's hard to wrap my mind about what he's trying to say. Has anybody got a good guess there?
What they took from the others, they will enjoy for a very short time. You'll be with them for just a short time.
So the spoil that they took very quickly, not going to be with them very much longer. They're not going to, they're not going to enjoy it. Which when we look at this, what's the time frame between this coming of the Assyrian army? Isaiah, you're going to have a son. He goes in, the son is named prior to the birth, prior to conception. He goes into his wife, and what's he told? What's he told?
Sorry.
That's okay. Things happen.
So before he's able to say my father, my mother, that Assyria is going to fall.
How quick is Assyria falling or Assyria coming? Assyria is coming in to take over. They're going to destroy us. How quick is this invasion going to win? How far out in the future?
I got confused. Assyria is going to fall.
Yes.
To Assyria.
How far out in the future are we talking?
Before 2 years. Yeah, before 2 years.
2 to 4. I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter, and she can jabber. But before this kid's able to say, my mom and my dad, so this is going to happen. This is upon them. We don't have a lot of time. So, as we continue on, the Lord also spoke to me again, saying, if there's no other thoughts or comments at that point, inasmuch as these people refuse the waters of Shiloah that flow softly, and rejoice in reason, and in Remaliah's son, now therefore, behold, the Lord brings up over them the waters of the river, strong and mighty, the king of Assyria in all his glory. He will go up over all his channels and over all of his banks. He will pass through Judah, flow over and pass over. He will reach up on the necks, and the stretching out of his wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. Be scattered, O you people, and be broken into pieces. Give ear, all you from far countries. Gird yourselves, but be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, but be broken into pieces. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the Lord word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. As he stands and starts talking, Isaiah, he's given a prophecy. How fast is this going to be? The next couple of years, he's speaking to the people. And when he speaks to them, inasmuch as these people refuse, why are they being punished? Or why is this nation coming in to destroy them?
Not following after God.
Not being obedient. Now, but in this verse, there's also 2 specific reasons given. Inasmuch as these people refused the waters of Shiloah that flow softly, and rejoice in reason and Remaliah's son. I think this is a hard lesson for us. It was probably a hard lesson for them, where some of you may be better than I am. We pointed this out all throughout this class. When God is working in us or on us or through us or having to do something, is God just arbitrarily doing stuff? James already said, because they did not follow God, they brought it upon themselves. And that's a hard lesson. I always joke with my kids, and it wasn't joking, it was serious. I'd say, if you find yourself in a hole, what's the first thing you should do? And they usually say, well, get out. No, you stop digging first, because chances are you've put yourself in your own hole. And if you stop and think about your life, how many times have you found yourself in a tight spot? No one to blame but yourself. So when they do this, and Isaiah's talking to them, he names these two specific things. And I read the commentators, and like I've shared with you, I'm trying to read it through and see what it means to me. But inasmuch as these people refuse the waters, and Homer Haley talked about, well, this could be alluding to this river. It could be out where Ahaz was just in the beginning of chapter 7 being spoken to by Isaiah and his first son. And then he's talking about, but they refuse the waters that flow softly. At face value, what does that sound like? If God's providing something, think of a scripture. As the deer panteth forth the water, so my soul longers after you. And we talk about, we can give an illustration that, the deer would go up to, chances are a deer is going to go to calmly moving water versus water that's rough and all that. Water that might spook it. There was something they were being fed that was the nice, easy way. They had calm water. God's lesson to Ahaz could have been a very calm lesson. As James pointed out, follow me. They've refused the good, easy path. You think that's a fair lesson there? So God, whether He was providing it easy, I had it delivered to you in a nice, gentle, easy package. But you refused that. And the second thing is, as we kind of alluded to at the end of class last week, they rejoice in reason in Remaliah's son. They're taking joy in the fact that, as we said and called them last week, their cousins in the north were just conquered. What's that mean? What's the problem with that?
First of all, they didn't pay any attention to why the North got into all this trouble.
Okay, so they're not paying attention to why. That everything in this book leads back to, we're not following God.
And then they're not seeing that they're going to put themselves in the same boat.
They put themselves in the same boat. And I'm not disagreeing, but go a little bit further and say, the heart of a person that takes joy in somebody else's destruction and pain.
And these are God's children too.
They're God's children. They're their own brethren.
That's right. And yet you're taking joy in their defeat.
But what's wrong with that? Because I really like it when somebody gets what's coming to them.
We do that with our enemies, don't we?
We do that with our enemies. And it is so incredibly hard that when you've been wronged to sit back and go, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. God's message throughout in the New Testament. It gets in the Thessalonian letters by the Apostle Paul. He talks in the book of Peter. These people are troubling you. It's so easy to get wrapped up and get consumed and want to inflict pain and inflict judgment, and it kind of go, yeah, come on. There was something I was going through one time, and it really was rocking my world, and I really would have loved to inflict a judgment, and I had dreams about doing something to somebody. That's not funny, Jean. For those of you out there, she's over here chuckling at me. We've all been there. And it finally hit me one day. Let God take care of it, because what God's going to give them is far worse than what I could ever imagine. Because for the Christians and for those who do not obey God, with flaming fire taking vengeance, when he's talking about the Thessalonian letters, we don't need to take joy when somebody destroys themselves. And that's a very hard lesson. Not only that, it's a hard lesson to say they've destroyed themselves, they deserved it, but I still must maintain who I am. We also have to understand, as a lesson for us today, we could get ourselves in the same boat. It's a very hard, difficult thing as a person of God to not take joy when somebody gets it. The coworker, the family member that's done you wrong, somebody in business. Just don't worry about that. Worry about where you are in your relationship with God. Thoughts, comments, questions?
have gathered you like chicks under my wings if you would have, but you would not. And it's like, there's a tremendous compassion and love and desire in God for His creation to come to Him. And if there's joy in heaven for every saved soul, there's weeping for every lost one. And so if we need to be like Christ and care about those who are lost or being lost, and not rejoice in the fact that I'm saved and that's all I care about.
And the irony is they just got wiped out, and I'm getting ready to. And we would like to have compassion. We would like for folks to have compassion on us when we're in that tough spot. Not think that they're just sitting over there making fun of us and laughing at us because we're getting what we deserve. Now therefore the Lord, behold, the Lord brings up over them. You've not received the gentle message that I gave you. Follow me. You've taken joy in your brethren being destroyed. Now I'm going to bring a flood over you. And this is when the Assyria comes in. And he paints this picture like it's the waters of the river, strong and mighty, like this flood. We don't have a lot of floods in Tallahassee, but we can understand and relate to a storm coming in off the Gulf, a hurricane. Have you ever watched, when you do, whether you play on Google or something like that or see on the internet, when there's a flood, the devastation of the water. It's incredible to think about. You can't stop it. You can't just get out there and go, hold up. You can't park your car in the way. It's going to wash it away. And it just paints this picture, this overwhelming flood of this army that we've already talked about. We've got the Egyptians coming in, that they're mighty like the flies that God whistles at them and tells them to come in. We've got the Assyrians coming in, or the Assyrians. The Syrians, they all came into the northern kingdom, but now it's just this mighty flood that just washes everything and devastates and pushes things out of the way. I remember, I'm from southeastern Kentucky, and there's a few rivers up there where I remember the early 70s when I was a little bitty guy, when you would see homes floating down the river. The devastation, this is going to come in, it's going to be so destructive. It'll overflow all of its banks at the end of verse 7. And will pass through Judah. He will flow over and pass over. He will reach up to the neck and the stretching out of his wings. It's all consuming. But it's not going to take everybody. There's going to be this remnant. Listen to the language here in verses 9 and following. Be scattered, or shattered, O you people. Be broken into pieces. Give ear, all you from a far country. They're listening. Gird yourself. What does gird yourself usually imply?
Get ready.
Prepare. You're going to prepare, but you're still broken. Prepare. Be broken into pieces. You can take counsel. You can go talk. You can get the brain power. It'll come to nothing. Why? It won't stand, just like in the last few chapters. It can't stand because this is from God. But it will not stand, for God is with us. What's going to happen is this army is going to come in, and there's going to be a few, the remnant left over. They're not going to totally overtake Judah. It's going to be bad. A lot are going to be lost, but it's not an absolute overtaking. That's why the southern kingdom never had the Assyrian captivity. The northern kingdom did. But they have the Babylonian captivity coming up later on. Anybody else? I don't like it when you all are quiet. Lee's smiling at me.
Well, you're right. You don't know who they're referring to and everything. When they're referring to water as E.
It is a very difficult read. It's not just like sitting. Gene's saying it's like I said earlier in the text. Paul writes to the church at Ephesus. You know who he's talking to and what he's talking about. The he's and the she's and this and that. This is difficult to read. It's hard to understand. Verse 11. For the Lord spoke thus to me with a strong hand. What's a strong hand?
Guidance.
guidance, firmness, instruction, yes. With a strong hand and instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people, saying, do not say a conspiracy concerning all the people. Call all that this people call a conspiracy. Nor be afraid of their threats, nor be troubled. The Lord of hosts, him you shall hallow. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. He will be a sanctuary, but a stone of stumbling, a rock of offense, to both the house of Israel, as a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble. They shall fall and be broken, be snared and taken. You're not listening to me. I offered it to you. The king is not listening, and his stubborn people aren't listening. Now he comes in. What? The conspiracy thing. Anybody guess, or you want me to just tell you what they told me? Isaiah's teaching a message. His message is against the alliances that Ahaz has formed with the other kingdoms or the other countries. In a sense, when Isaiah starts to preach and teach, he's going against the king. It would be easy for him to be accused of undermining the king. A conspiracy. You're a conspirator. You're a traitor. As Isaiah is being talked to by God, the Lord spoke to me, guiding me with firmness, with a strong hand. He instructed me that I should not walk in the way that the people are, saying, do not say a conspiracy concerning all this people, as they call a conspiracy. Do not be afraid of their threats. Isaiah, you're going to be going against what the king has done. You're going to be looking as if you're trying to uprise or go against or have a conspiracy. Don't listen to them. Don't get pulled into that. Don't be afraid. Don't be troubled. He's telling Isaiah, the Lord of hosts, him you shall respect me. Put your faith in me, Isaiah. He's encouraging you in. Isaiah's already seen God. Isaiah's already been through and pulled out for this ministry. But Isaiah's going to come under attack. Isaiah, keep your faith where it needs to stay. Let him be your fear. And I kind of struggle with that, the language. Let him be your fear. Has anybody got a better in verse 13? The Lord of hosts, him you shall hallow. We understand that, giving God the praise, the honor, reverence. But let him be your fear.
Well, if God is with you, you don't need to fear anything else. But you do need to fear, respect.
Respect and reverence. Let him be your dread.
Better dread him.
Could this also be that when you stand in God, back to, instead of taking joy or let God be the vengeance. Let God be the one. Well, not only that, as I read that, it just came back to me. As Isaiah presents this message, kind of like what Lee was saying in our class on Sunday morning, this isn't Isaiah's message. It's God's message. So as he speaks to the people and he's saying that this alliance, what we've been doing, our king turning his back, and he's trying to teach them and share with them. Isaiah 1, don't take it personal. You're really only speaking on the behalf. This isn't your message that you're not the traitor. I'm teaching the truth and they're trading on me. Joanne?
Well, it seems to me God is saying that you don't need to fear or dread the nations around you who you are clamoring to have an alliance with. You should fear or dread me, have an alliance with me.
And that struggles to have fear of God. Back to what we like, a healthy respect and reverence versus being afraid of God. We don't want to dread God. But we do need to understand, unless we're in the error, then we should dread him. I see you, Lee. But we do need to have that. We're fighting his battle. Lee?
Well, there is a fearful expectation of judgment when we are outside of the will of God. But this is a passage that is kind of a man on the street moment. And really it's a foreshadowing of what we're facing today. If we're focused simply on the world and the system of the world, this doesn't say conspiracy theory, it says conspiracy. And that is an alliance, that is what the nations are doing, that's what people are doing. Don't fear what man can do to you. Fear him who has the power to throw your soul into to Tartarus, that has the power to kill the soul. And so, if you, as Joanne said, ally yourself with God, lift your eyes up, see the spiritual reality here, forget the news of the day reality here, then all these things are under God's control.
Not only fearing the one who not just kill you, but as you said, send your soul. But he's got a twofold purpose. Look at the first few words of verse 14. He will also be your sanctuary. He's a place of refuge. He's a place of safety if you're in good standing with him. So God's got the dual nature, but a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. And we know this is quoted again in 1 Peter chapter 1. Little messianic there. And Peter is talking about and refers to Jesus. And we've talked about this before. In a sense, when we're faithful to God, it's not that we go out into the world to try to cause trouble. But if we're faithful and stand and have a standard of trying to be excellent based because of our salvation, because what God's done for us, not that we are perfect, we are offensive. And we can be accused of causing some to stumble, but the bottom line is the Messianic prophet here, or the Messianic picture. Both houses of Israel. But look in the remaining 14 and 15. As a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and many among them shall stumble, they shall fall, they shall be broken, be snared, and taken. There's a pretty complete picture of the relationship of what's going to happen to. This isn't just, they're going to get tripped up a little bit. They're going to be scattered a little bit. Stumble, complete fall, broken into pieces, trapped, and hauled off, taken.
In his earthly ministry, Jesus had some very similar language. He was the rock of offense, the stone of stumbling. But he said, throw yourself upon the stone, or the stone will fall on you and crush you. It's the same stone. And so that imagery is the same thing here. It's the same God that is going to accomplish his will in this. Either you throw yourself upon him, and he will be merciful to you, you don't get crushed, or that rock is going to fall, and it's going to do what it's going to do. And he's saying the same thing here. It's still your choice. It's going to happen either way, but it's your choice.
The easy way or the hard way.
Yes.
It's going to happen. I appreciate that. Bind up the testimony. Seal the law, my disciples. And I will wait on the Lord, who hides his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Here I am, or here am I, and the children whom the Lord has given me. We are for signs and wonders in Israel, from the Lord of hosts who dwells in Mount Zion. Okay, bind up the testimony. Testimony could be referring to the teachings that he's been giving, the law, everything that they have. I've been teaching you. I've been telling you what's going to happen. I've tried to tell Ahaz. I've tried to tell you. Take the testimony. Seal this law, this teaching among my disciples, the followers, those that will listen. Huh? Oh, you're just talking to Jack. But I will wait, and I will wait upon the Lord, who hides his face from the house of Jacob. They're not listening. I've given you the testimony. Take the law. Take the testimony of the law. How would you say bind it up? It's written. It's keep it. Hold on to it. Remember it. But what this, I will wait upon the Lord. Flip back a page if you, depending on how you're, and what does, when he's talking to Ahaz in chapter 7, and he's gone out, and they're worried that here comes this army. He's made the alliance, it's not, and say to him, take heed, be quiet. Do not fear or be faint-hearted. To me, that same kind of picture, that it brought to me the same thing. I've given you the rules, I've given you what I expect, I've given you the testimony, I've given you the law. Hold on to it, bind, seal it. It's marked. I'm going to wait on the Lord. My trust is in the Lord, exactly what we've been saying. But he's also saying, what's God doing with this point in time? He's had to turn his face from it. Why? Because they're not in alliance. They're not throwing themselves on his mercy and are on the stone. They have chosen to be underneath, and God's turning his face from them. And Isaiah's saying, those that are the disciples, those that you listen, we bound up the law. I'm going to wait on God. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be still and know. I will hope in him. When I read verse 18 and I started thinking about it, he says, here am I and the children whom the Lord has given me. Does that bring anything to your minds? Thoughts? Here am I and the children whom the Lord has given me. We are for signs and wonders in Israel. When I read it at face value, I was thinking that he was talking about, here, Isaiah, the children you gave me, the people of Israel that are a remnant. Homer points out, Homer Haley, that God has given Isaiah 2 children, and both children are assigned. Both children's names mean something. Those children were assigned to Ahaz. Those children were assigned to the whole nation. Listen to God. Put your trust in God. Here am I and the children whom you've given me. We are for signs and wonders in Israel. Not that I want to push my point, but even the remnant, or maybe it's twofold. The fact that God takes care of, this is God's plan, this is what God has said would happen. It is a sign for the world, for all of us. We are for signs and wonders in Israel. Isaiah and his 2 boys were signs to the entire world. God has expectations, and God will carry them out. Other thoughts, questions there?
He's already talked about Emmanuel in chapter 7. Then he's going to again make reference to Messiah in chapter 9. But it all is building toward the end. He's going to, the last several chapters, he's going to talk about the restoration that is to come. But the very opening words of chapter 53, where you have the suffering servant, the first question he asks is, who has believed our report? And so all of this is building to that point. Are you listening to what's being said? The binding up of the testimony there's, God has said enough for you already. And even at this point, if the prophecies, the written prophecies of Isaiah stopped at chapter 8, people would have had enough to know that God expected them to turn around. But what more are you going to require? Well, Isaiah's going to be a sign. His children are going to be a sign. God is going to communicate with you until it's too late. Who's going to believe the report?
Take that thought and go right back to there's 2 reasons why I'm going to bring this on you. You had the nice, quiet, still waters. Earlier on, when we first started your class, you can have this the easy way or the hard way. It's our choice. And that's hard to grasp. But as we grow older and as we mature in our faith to Christ, we need to understand that. If we just go ahead and make the choice to submit to God, it makes life a lot easier. As he carries on with this thought, and he says, when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards, who whisper and mutter. Again, remember back in verse 11, he's saying that with a strong guiding hand and giving instruction, don't walk in the way of the people. When they say to you, seek the medium, or the mediums and the wizards, who whisper and mutter. Should not a people seek their God? Should they seek the dead on behalf of the living? Think about this. Maybe they're in their other false religions. How many times people, even today, you've got people that want to seek other powers. But the question is asked, should not a people seek their God? The same thing with God's talking. We get wrapped up sometimes in, whoa, Cain and Abel. How on earth could Cain have, maybe God didn't tell Cain. I don't believe that. I don't believe that there's ever been a time in history where God didn't allow his people to know what he expected. He doesn't expect us blindly and stupidly just to throw something up there. He puts it out there. He tells us what he wants. From the beginning of time, he has wanted the people to follow him. He has wanted to be their God. He wants us to be his people. Joanne?
Well, it also gives us a hint here how flagrant they are in their disobedience, because divination was strictly prohibited by the law. So these people have really blended their religions with religions in the area. So it's like they're...
And we addressed that about 2 weeks ago, and I think Joe was the one that did it. Why? Because they were specifically told, wipe them out. Why do you wipe out the false teaching? So that it does not pollute you. Lee.
Instead of wizard, my translation says necromancers, and those are, of course, they're dealing with the dead. They're speaking to the dead, mediums, etc. It's not that this is not real, because the spirit of Samuel was summoned by the witch of Endor at the behest of King Saul. She thought he was going to, she couldn't do it because he had killed her because it was illegal. It's not that it doesn't work. But the question there is, who's your God? Is your God the dead? If you could inquire the dead, what would they say? Listen to God while you're still alive?
Okay, Joe.
This whole discussion points back to the importance of those two words at the start of verse 16, bind up. And that refers right back to verse 1, to write it down, to capture what God is telling them. Because before, when he told them, don't go over there and let the other folks stay, you didn't do it, but nobody had written a record. Now he's saying, let's write it down so that you don't do these things that you continually do. I want it written down. I want a record that people can refer to. I want to take away any excuse they can say, well, I didn't know, why didn't God tell me? That's why I want you to bind it. And I want them to rehearse the testimonies. I want you to write it and have it in such a way that it actually is in their heart.
Seal the law. We know from the New Testament scripture, we know from scripture period, if a king wrote something, seal it, put his mark, seal it up, bind it, you're right. Necromancers, but okay, look at the descriptive term with that and wizards, medium and wizards, who whisper and mutter. Their message isn't even understandable to begin with. It's not clear. There's no substance to it.
The ESV says chirp and mutter.
Chirp.
Chirp.
Chirp, 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 chirp. And the question that God, or at least said, should not people seek their God? Capital G. Shouldn't we be seeking Jehovah? Not talking to the dead. They're dead. Why talk to the dead on our behalf? To Joe's point, to the law and the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, what word? The law and the testimony that I am, my children are, that you've been taught, that God has delivered. If they don't speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Sounds a little bit Like that Galatians chapter 1. If anybody speaks any other gospel than this, it is not a gospel. Let him be accursed. If you're not speaking according to the law of God, there's no light in you. There's no light in them. They will pass through and hard-pressed and hungry. And it shall happen when they are hungry that they will be enraged and curse their king and their God and look upward. As this flood comes through and destroys, these people who are not listening to God and have turned their back and they're passing through this, because of the devastation, they're not going to have food. They're going to be hungry. I forget the exact word, but Homer was saying basically, they work themselves into such a rage. They're angry, they're mad, they're cursing God. You're not providing, there's no food. They're looking to cursing God. Apparently they've forgotten that they're there because of their own problem. They dug their own hole. Which is a common thing for us today. We get mad at God because God's not done what we wanted Him to do. But it wasn't about what we wanted God to do. It was about what He wanted us to do. They cursed their king, their God. And they look upward. Then they look toward the earth and see the trouble and the darkness, gloom and anguish, and they will be driven into darkness. Kind of like the hardening of their own hearts. It's just destroying them, making it worse. Anything? Thoughts? Yes, Joe.
I just keep getting hung up on verse 17, where the last half, or who hides his face from the house of Jacob. God's removing His saving presence from His people. And, we see that same thing in Revelation, where He'll remove His lampstand from a disobedient church. It's like, I am secure in my salvation because I have a merciful, loving God. Not because I'm a good person, but I know God is a good God. But I also catch my breath every once in a while with the realization that He will not hesitate to remove His presence from those who continually reject Him. And to me, that is just catches me,
It is sad. It leaves the musician ears. Blood, sweat, and tears. What did I pray there?
Yes.
The world having that mindset that, we all want to go to heaven. But nobody wants to think about the consequences of the hell. You have to have both for it to be just and fair. And you're absolutely right. The modern day concept of tolerance, that God is love and God's going to love me no matter what. It's like some of the biggest lies that Satan plays on society. The once saved, always saved. You just confess His name. You just believe and you're good to go. God expects faithfulness and obedience. But again, we said it last week, I believe, we've said it lately. His yoke is easy and His burden is light. We make it difficult. He's made it easy. They refuse the waters of Shiloh that flow softly and gently.
Back to Joanne's point, in Isaiah 55, and in verse 6, it says something interesting there. It says, "Seek the Lord while He may be found.
Whoa.
And call upon Him while He is near." And so, when you think about all that was going to come upon the people, the calamity that was the Babylonian destruction of the land and destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and all of that, there were faithful people that even died in that. But they died in the grace of God. They still suffered, part of the consequence of the people. But they had sought Him while He was to be found. They had called upon him while he was near. But there are those that are going to be caught up in that same calamity that are going to be eternally lost, and they're going to cry out in that last moment, and he's turned his face away. And that's a frightening concept.
For those that are out there, Lee just referenced Isaiah 55:6. Seek the Lord while he may be found. If you think about that, the implications, like you said, you better be talking to God while he's in your presence or while you're in his presence, because once he's gone, call upon him while he's near. Don't wait till it's too late.
It's that hardness of heart that creeps up on you, and that's part of what's too late when you're hardened your heart, so that you no longer hear what he or any loving person is telling you. It's like the people on the earth when the ark started floating, the doors were shut. They could not get in. He turned his face from them. They had however many years, 40 years.
Which also goes back to Lee's illustration with the rich man and Lazarus. They wouldn't even listen to the prophets. They've been taught all along. Why would they listen to a dead man now? Let's end our class there. Thank you, and you'll have a great evening.